Alright, what's up guys? This is gonna be the first video in like a little series that I'm gonna do regarding fighter weapons, just so I can showcase them off all individually and kind of give them some love, because I know I go over a lot of fighter weapons, like falchion, arming sword, morningstar, all those. I mention them in my gear guide videos, but I don't usually give them like in particular their own spotlights, and I don't go super in depth on them. I'll talk about like, lightly on the pros and cons and why I use what I'm using, but I usually don't go super in depth on the weapon itself and discuss like, the reasoning behind using it. The why, like the pros, the cons, all that. So I thought I would do that. And to start, the video or the series off, I guess I will do arming sword, because truthfully speaking, arming sword, in my opinion, is one of the most fun weapons in the entire game. It's incredibly versatile in the way you can use it, and overall, it's just incredibly fun. I love this weapon. Truthfully speaking, though, it has kind of fallen off in recent months of play. It really hasn't been excelling that much. Last wipe, it was solid if you built full true damage. Other than that, it's kind of been pretty lackluster. This patch, even more so, they nerfed how much damage you could build for additional and true, while also nerfing the base damage of it very, very slightly. Purple arming swords used to roll 35 damage, now they roll 34. Legendary used to be 36, now it's 35. So it did suffer some very slight nerfs. Meanwhile, you have Falchion rolling up to 44 damage in a legendary, while Arming Sword only, it said only rolls 35, so it's a 9 damage difference. And if you don't know how weapon damage scales, roughly speaking, this is going to be about 18, 20-ish actual on-hit damage that you're missing out on. So it has kind of been pretty bad. And then comparatively for the move speed bonus, it has 20, while Falchion has 25. But then if you compare it to something like Morningstar, Morningstar has almost Falchion base damage. It's one less than Falchion at still being 8 more than the Arming Sword. It still has that 20 move speed penalty, which is the exact same as Arming Sword, but it also has 15% armor pen on top of that. So overall, in terms of just raw stats, the Morningstar and the Falchion does outclass the Arming Sword. However, the Arming Sword does have one really big advantage, and that it has really fast swings. Yes, the swings don't hit very hard, but whenever they, do, come out, they come out very, very fast. And there are two reasons that this is good. One is because the faster you swing, the faster you can block. And there's an interaction with Shield Mastery that I'm going to show a little bit later in this video. That's really, really good about that. But the second reason is that the faster you swing, the more hits you get out, and the more on-hit effects you apply, like true damage, which is exactly why Arming Sword has been used in the past, because you can build, it used to build like 11 true damage, and with all that true damage, you were sitting there, you were constantly hitting people, and you were constantly, even if your individual hits aren't doing a ton, like let's say you're only hitting, you're only hitting for like, let's say like 40 on something or somebody, you're also doing plus, 11 true damage, which is what it was last wipe, each hit. So no matter if you're hitting a 75% PDR fighter, or, a 20% PDR wizard, 40% PDR bard, whatever it is, you're doing at least that guaranteed 11 additional damage to them on top of that. And yes, Falchion and Morningstar both have higher base damage, and in terms of scaling damage, they're going to do more, but they swing a lot slower, so they're applying that true damage much, much slower, which could be pretty detrimental to you, because in a fight, let's say your Arming Sword gets off 8 or 9 hits, whereas your Falchion only gets off 4 or 5, that's a pretty big difference. It's a 40 or 50 damage difference of just true damage alone. And is the Falchion going to make up that, or is it going to make up that damage in terms of like the raw weapon damage it has? Possibly. It's definitely possible. It's not a guarantee, depending on how much PDR they have, because that's all, physical damage scales. But overall, the application of the true damage does make Arming Sword semi-viable. I'm not going to say it's great. It is okay at best, is what I will say. And that's even with, having to use this true damage build. Because I will say this right now. Like here, I'll show you guys my build actually really quick. I would not recommend using Arming Sword on anything less than an incredibly expensive kit with really good stats. As you see, this kit has 10% Fizz Power bonus. I've got, action speed's a little bit lower than I would like. Ideally, you'd have this a little bit higher, around 10%. And then I'm still relatively tanky in this kit. And I also run Sword Mastery with this. But like this kit, the important thing is I have true damage here, 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 and then I'm running a legendary Frosty Amulet, so that brings my total up to 8 true damage. And I would not recommend running, if you're not running at least, 5, 6, 7 true damage, something like that, I would not run Arming Sword. And on top of that, you would also like to have a decent amount of Fizz Power. This is a little bit lower than I would like. However, I mean, it's going to get brought up about 4% from my, my Arming Sword here, because it rolls Fizz Power and Fizz damage bonus. But overall, this is like kind of like the bare minimum I would spend on a kit to be able to run Arming Sword. And this kit is incredibly expensive. I will say this is, 20, 30K plus kit. This is not cheap at all. But moving on from that, so the pros of the Arming Sword, they are what they always have been. It's incredibly fast swings, which leads to being, you have a good chance to play offense and defense. You can switch between them very, very fast. You can get in, get a quick swing off, and, if they try to turn and retaliate, hit you back, you can try to get a block, right? That's the best part of it. Whereas something like a falchion or a morningstar, those weapons are a lot less about finesse, and they're more about just overpowering your enemy. Think of like, Dark Souls if you ever played that game. Arming Sword would be like a dexterity weapon, whereas these are like strength weapons, right? Strength weapons are big, unga bunga, like I'm just gonna kill you. Dexterity weapons are more about, moving around, getting hits in where you can, playing, methodically, if you will. That's, I think, the best way to describe how you play Arming Sword. And I will try to put a few clips of me using the Arming Sword up, because I was messing around with a kit like this last night. So I'll try to put a few clips of me using it up. But Arming Sword, it is at its best when you are making use of a shield. And the reason I'm going to say that is because of the perk right here, Shield Mastery. If you don't know, I've mentioned this 100 times, so you probably do know now, but if you're new to the game, I'll give it one more time. It says, when you successfully block an attack, gain 50% action speed towards your next block. That's not exactly accurate. Whenever you block an attack, you get 50% action speed, but it doesn't go towards your next block, it goes towards your next attack. So if you have somebody hit your shield, and then you immediately left click, you have a very, very fast attack coming out, and I will put footage of that up on the screen right now. As you can see, he's swinging the falchion at my shield, it hits my shield, I'm able to left click and get my shield back up before he swings again. And this is what a lot of people expect blocking to be like in this game, of I block their attack, now I have a chance to hit. And it goes back and forth like that, when truthfully, that's not really how it is. If you have something like a falchion, for example, you can block an attack, and even if you block that attack, they will be able to swing again as you're swinging at them. So even if you block one, you're going to get a trade. And yes, blocking is really nice to activate things like counterattack, but you're not getting that window of opportunity to hit them. It's just like, I blocked, activated a perk, and now they're going to hit me, but I'm also going to hit them. And yeah, you might hit them first, but it's probably not going to make a big difference because you're still getting hit. So it doesn't lead to as much outplay potential, whereas Arming Sword has a ton of it. It obviously depends on some of the weapons. Some of the faster weapons, if you block them and swing, they're still going to get a hit off, like, a dagger or something. You're probably not going to be able to do it if you have a ton of action speed, because something that people don't know, action speed isn't just attacking, right? Like, I love to say, oh, action speed is just your attack speed. That's not necessarily true. It's the speed of all your actions. So the recovery between attacks to get your shield back up. Action speed also affects that. So the more action speed you have, the faster you can also block. But with that being said, Arming Sword obviously does have its very, very big cons. The premier one being how low its damage is. Even when you're fighting squishy targets, Arming Sword can take up to 4 hits to kill sometimes, especially if you're not hitting headshots, which just feels really, really bad. There are plenty of situations where you get on somebody and you just don't have the damage to finish the job, which, like I said, isn't going to feel good. Being able getting on a wizard or a warlock or whatever, and then not having the damage to kill them is just going to feel really bad. That's just what it is. However, kind of on the same line, back to a pro that the Arming Sword does have is the moveset. The moveset is phenomenal for the first 2 attacks. The horizontal slash the diagonal slashes are some of the best attacks in the entire game because it gives you so much room to go for headshots. Falchion, on the other hand, has a really, really bad moveset because it's just pure horizontal attacks. And then obviously you have the vertical overhead, but that attack's kind of wonky. But the horizontal attacks are really, really bad, not because it's hard to hit, but whenever you do hit people, you're more often going to hit their arms or their body. And if you go for headshots, it's really, really easy for people to dodge it, block it, duck it, whatever it may be. So that is like the really big downside to Arming Sword, is whenever you're swinging, especially on faster targets like rogues or warlocks or anything, with how easy, how much they're moving around, it makes it really hard to go for those headshots, which are really going to deal a ton of damage. Well, yes, it makes it easier to hit them, but if you're hitting arms, overall, you're not doing a ton of damage. Morningstar has the same moveset, effectively, that Arming Sword does, with a better third attack. The downside is it's much, much slower, so it leaves more room for people to dodge, and the Morningstar has very, very bad sour spots. If you don't know what sour spots are, there's also sweet spots. And what it is, effectively, is there are certain parts of the weapon that do more or less damage. Take the Morningstar, for example. So the weapon here, from this little piece right here up, like the whole head of the weapon that has the spiked ball on it, that does 100% damage for the weapon. So if you hit them with this, you are doing the 43 weapon damage. From, the hilt up to here, you know, up to this like the whole like brown handle part. If you hit them with this, you're doing like 80% damage. And this is on, you know, the wiki. If you want to go check it out there, just look up the Dark and Darker wiki. You can see all the weapon sour spots there. So the Morningstar has a really, really bad sour spot. And I know I was talking about Morningstar in terms of using it, but this is, like I said, this right here is the downside of using these weapons comparatively. Falchion, same way. Sour spots aren't as bad, sweet spots not as large, but the arming sword has a pretty good sweet spot, generally just because of how you're going to hit people with the weapon. You know, with the way the moveset works and with the movements your penalty, you're able to maneuver more easily in fights. So more often than not, you're playing on the tip of the weapon. You're able to get headshots really easily. Even if not, you're able to get body shots. And generally, you do not hit many arm shots with the arming sword just from the way the weapon works. Overall, the arming sword is an incredibly fun weapon to use, and like I said, it is pretty weak right now. I definitely do think it needs to be buffed a bit to compete with the other two weapons like Falchion and Morningstar. And as you can see, most of my kits, all of them are Falchions. I use the arming sword very little because how tailored you have to make your kit to work with it. Like, yes, you can run it in a worse kit than this, and you can run it on Slayer. Slayer, it's actually not bad, specifically because Slayer has so much damage built into the kit. You know, 5 weapon damage from Slayer, 2 weapon damage from Sword Mastery. Not that you can't run Sword Mastery on plate, you still can, obviously, and I normally do, but just adding on top of that, because it's something you always run, there's no contention. Excuse me. And then, you know, you build Fizz Power, you build True, add damage, all these other things that you don't necessarily always go for on plate. You always build these on Slayer, which makes it way more viable on Slayer than it is on anything else. But with that being said, that's probably going to wrap up the video. Not really much else to say about Arming Sword. You know, like I said, it is an incredibly fun weapon to use, and it does have really, really good versatile options in how you're able to play fights with it. And if you've never tried it out and you've only ever tried Falchion, I recommend trying it. You know, if you have to build a kit around it, try to do that. But it is a very, very fun weapon. And once you get good with Arming Sword, it does feel that it's like a higher skill weapon. Falchion, on the other hand, you know, it doesn't feel like it's a very skill-intensive weapon. It's literally just most of the time, it's just a left click and I'm going to brute force through you, whereas Arming Sword isn't that way. Arming Sword requires good use of blocks, positioning, all of that. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.